Some of the country's most senior CEOs are taking on Apple, Meta and Google, calling for more regulation. The big miners and the banks lead a tumble on the share market, and claims an official photo of the Princess of Wales has been doctored by the palace. Welcome to Fear and Greed Business News, Australia's best business podcast. It is Tuesday, the 12th of March, 2024. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, after the show, you have an interview coming up today with Dr. Shane Oliver, Chief Economist at AMP.
I do. What's great about the chat is that we bring the big picture, the macroeconomic outlook, into what it means for investing, what it means for equities, what it means for bonds, what it means for Bitcoin and things like that. Not that many people out there have the ability that Shane does to actually bring everything all together and wrap it all up with a neat bow on it. And that's exactly what we do in the interview today. So it's well worth a listen.
Yeah, I really liked when you asked him that question about Bitcoin and about gold, how both gold and Bitcoin can be kind of soaring at the moment when they're at kind of opposite ends of the risk spectrum. And I thought it was a really interesting topic. Great interview overall.
Yeah, it was great. Good fun.
And he's coming up after the show, so stick around for that one. The main story this morning, though, Sean, how about this? Some big hitters in the Australian business community have teed off at the US-based tech companies, calling for more scrutiny and potentially regulation of the global giants.
Commonwealth Bank's CEO, Matt Comyn, said he found it extraordinary, the lack of scrutiny the large tech companies come under. He said given Apple made revenue of $12 billion in Australia in 2022 and paid tax of $160 million, it had an effective tax rate of 4% compared to the 30% paid by the Commonwealth Bank. Speaking at the Financial Review Annual Business Summit, Comyn said he reckons the tech giants are undisputed world champions of kabuki theatre. For those who don't know what kabuki theatre is, basically it means plenty of showmanship, not a great deal of content. Another one at the conference was former Federal Treasurer and outgoing chair of Nine Entertainment, Peter Costello. He described Google and Meta as monopolies on a global scale that would make Rockefeller blush.
They are masters of the headlines here, aren't they?
They are. I mean, Peter Costello has always been good at the headline, but Matt Comyn is a pretty sensible guy. He doesn't, I mean, it is an unusually aggressive stance for him to take. Anyway, Nine, where Costello chairs, and other media companies are pushing for Meta to pay to use news content after the owner of Facebook said it would pull out of agreements soon to expire. So he's not happy. Then we had Macquarie Group CEO Shamara Ramanayaka, who said the US and rest of the world, and I quote, does need to allow other competition to come in, end quote, against the big tech players. Now, she was a little bit more circumspect. She declined to back up Mr. Comyn's calls for more regulation. She just said, for now at least, it was better for Macquarie to work with them. There has been so much scrutiny in Australia on the banks over many years, now on the big supermarket chains. We just haven't had that on the tech sector, and you can see CEOs here getting frustrated by it. Now, overseas, particularly in Europe, the tech companies have felt the wrath of regulators, but it just hasn't happened here. You do get the feeling that the lack of scrutiny locally won't last. You just get the feeling that the government at some point is going to have to step in on this.
Sean, you know when you've had a big night out, right?
No, but go on.
And the next morning you're like, did I say anything? Did I overshare? Did I go too far at any point?
Yeah.
Do you reckon any of these leaders sat down after their speeches and go, do you reckon I went a bit far there?
I think I did a Donald Trump there.
Oh, yeah. Certainly got some attention. It was a big summit overall, wasn't it, with a bunch of business leaders appearing?
It's a bit of a who's who, really. I mean, why watch the Oscars or the Australia-New Zealand cricket test when you can watch the Finns Business Summit, really? Another high-profile speaker was Woodside boss Meg O'Neill. She said commodity prices have stabilised after a period of disruption from the COVID-19 pandemic through to the war in Ukraine. She's been surprised by the lack of volatility flowing from the Middle East crisis, saying it just shows supply chains are now much more resilient. But she says China and Southeast Asia must reduce their reliance on coal to help lower global carbon emissions. Now, because of all the disruption over the past few years, China and Southeast Asian economies have used more coal, and that needs to come off, she says. O'Neill says Chinese energy consumption in 2023 was 10 times that of Japan, and the vast majority of that energy comes from coal-fired power.
All right. Take me through what happened on local markets yesterday. Quite a day.
It sure was. It was a big fall on the share market, with the benchmark S&P ASX 200 closing down 1.8% to 7,704 points. After all, the euphoria of last week came crashing down yesterday. The materials, financials and energy sectors fell hardest, but it was pretty much a case of all sectors being sold off. In fact, 80% of the top 200 ended lower. Only 3 of the top 50 stocks, Coles, Auckland Airport and Xero, ended higher yesterday. In the case of the big miners, commodity prices drove their performance. More on that shortly. In the case of the banks and some other sectors, profit takers stepped in. What's that mean, I hear you ask, Michael?
You saw my mouth open. I was about to query and you've preempted it. Please go on.
So, because the share price of Commonwealth Bank, for example, has risen so much in recent weeks, hitting all-time highs, investors step in and sell, booking the profit, so they can actually take the profit they've made. They might have bought it at $100 and it's now $121. Well, they take that $21 off the table. That meant that Commonwealth Bank was down 2.7% yesterday. National Australia Bank nearly 3%. Westpac was more than 3%. ANZ was down 2%. So a lot of the talk yesterday was about the fact that profit takers had gone in to take some money off the table.
Wow, massive day. What's happening in international markets?
Well, oil remains under pressure ahead of monthly reports from OPEC and the International Energy Agency this week. Brent is fetching just over $81 a barrel. When we say it's under pressure, it's still pretty high. And not that I've got self-interest in any of the next minute or two, Michael.
I suspect we are united, Sean. We are all sharing in this self-interest. Please, go on.
Petrol prices. Frustratingly high at the moment. Obviously not helped by a weak Australian dollar. Still, according to Fuel Price Australia, E10 petrol is particularly expensive in Brisbane, with the average price being around $2.23 a litre. Sydney is close to $2 a litre, while Melbourne's just over $1.90 a litre on average. It's around $1.70 a litre in Adelaide and about $2.11 in Canberra. So there's more than a 50-cent gap between the most expensive and cheapest capital cities. I do not understand why.
It makes no sense to me.
So then I looked into the latest Australian Competition and Consumer Commission quarterly report into petrol prices, just to see if the current levels are particularly high. Now, the latest quarterly report considers September 2023 quarter. Back then, petrol prices across the country were at record highs. Based on that, and using the proverbial back of the envelope, the average petrol price in Brisbane, Canberra and Sydney is definitely at a record high now, much higher than they were in that ACCC report for the September 2023 quarter. It's just super expensive at the moment and very frustrating for car drivers. Michael?
No self-interest there, Sean. I think we are all on your side in asking these questions.
Excellent. I have diverted a lot from international markets here. I better go back briefly.
That's fine. You're allowed to.
Gold's not far off $2,200 an ounce, still trading at those higher levels. Bitcoin's trading around $68,600 a unit, and the Aussie dollar's buying just over 66 US cents.
All right, plenty happening. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Federal Treasurer Jim Chalmers has opened the way to fast-track approvals for major projects in a move that could help the government win over coalition support for a tougher petroleum resource rent tax.
Dr. Chalmers, he was also at the Australian Financial Review Summit. He said the balance of risks was shifting from inflation to growth. He said the government won't ignore the inflation threat, but it also can't ignore the way the economy is slowing. He used the summit to announce a number of new initiatives, including the abolition of about 500 nuisance tariffs, basically tariffs that do little for revenue but certainly cost business. He wants to streamline the system of environmental approvals and make them clearer, including in sectors such as oil and gas. The Treasurer said the changes would clarify what the national environmental standards are and make it faster and easier to assess whether a project meets them. There'll also be changes to the regulatory regime for banks, particularly the smaller operators. Now, the government is hoping that some of these changes will help secure opposition support for its legislation to toughen the petroleum resource rent tax, which it wants to raise about an extra $2.4 billion over the next 4 years.
And just quickly, the Treasurer is also working on streamlining ways for companies to complete mergers.
Yes, Dr. Chalmers said he wants to make it faster by allowing low-risk mergers to proceed more quickly. He said the current system risks harming productivity growth, and the feedback Treasury's received is that the current merger rules may also be too permissive, allowing some mergers that don't deliver benefits.
Now, Sean, the share prices of BHP, Rio Tinto and Fortescue Metals Group have tumbled this year as the price of iron ore falls.
The big three miners have been among the worst performers of the large caps in 2024, largely because the price of a tonne of iron ore has gone from more than $144 to around $110. China is the reason, not just the weakness in the economy, particularly in real estate and manufacturing, but also on the back of reports that there is a massive buildup of ore at ports. In fact, they're supposed to be at their highest level in a year. Not helping was the annual National People's Congress in Beijing, which ended yesterday with no talk of major stimulus measures. Now, BHP, Rio Tinto and Fortescue Metals share prices are all down a massive 15% this year, including big drops yesterday. That's a very heavy weight on the ASX 200, which of course has done very well this year, notwithstanding yesterday. Over the past 12 months, Fortescue Metals Group is up 15%, so it's done okay, but the other two miners have gone backwards.
Now, Sean, I suspect there'd be a few happy shareholders here. The share price of software company Task jumped 90% yesterday after a US company offered to buy the group for $310 million. That's more than double Task's last closing price.
So much for that normal 30% premium. Task offers tech solutions for the hospitality sector, stuff like point of sale, apps, loyalty programs. Most of us have probably used them in one way or another. Their customers include Guzman y Gomez, Starbucks, Michelle's, Donut King and Gloria Jeans, but the big one is the McDonald's app, which it facilitates in about 50 countries. The company was founded in 2000 by the Howden family, basically out of the garage. That family still owns about 36% of it. The two sons now run it. So a very big payday for the family. Also, when it listed, staff got about 4% of the shares. So good on them. Not often do you get a story where, such a huge premium is paid for a company. I hope they go well.
That's a fantastic success story. Love that one. Now, the size of the Australian exchange-traded fund industry hit a new record last month for assets under management, jumping more than 3% to just under $190 billion.
Beta Shares says international equities remain popular for ETF investors, continuing the trend of the past 4 months. More than $1 billion of net inflows last month, or 2/3 of the month's flows, were in international equities products. The second best category was fixed income. That received about $300 million of net flows. The best performing ETFs were overwhelmingly crypto-focused products, with both Ethereum, Bitcoin, and crypto-oriented equities rising strongly post the approval of US-listed Bitcoin ETF.
Major toll road operator Transurban has called for reforms in the way tolls are applied in Sydney, following a state government report recommending a major overhaul of the system.
Yeah, a very Sydney-based story, but has ramifications for the rest of the country. Two-way tolling on the Sydney Harbour Bridge and Tunnel, two ways, so whether you're going into the city or out of the city. Also on the Eastern Distributor, as well as charging motorists less the longer they drive on toll roads, are among key recommendations from the interim review led by former competition watchdog chair Alan Fells. The review also proposes an extra infrastructure charge for using major tunnels or the Sydney Harbour Bridge, according to a story in the Sydney Morning Herald. Fells also called on the New South Wales government to take back control of tolls via a body known as State Tollco. It's a new body. He's named it State Tollco. It would set future tolls and inject greater competition into the market, Fells says, while taking into account the contractual rights of toll operators. Now, you can imagine how excited the toll groups like Transurban, which has spent billions of dollars creating roads across the country, particularly in New South Wales. Imagine how happy they are to hear this report.
They'd be delighted.
Now, what Fells says is it actually could mean higher tolls some places, lower tolls other places. Transurban said the report is part of the process of delivering better outcomes to customers. Kind of brave face yesterday. Then pointed out that about 1 million trips are taken every day on toll roads in Sydney, so something must be working okay. Anyway, it is very interesting to see because Melbourne has many of the same issues. Brisbane or southeast Queensland will increasingly have some of these issues as the development up there is completed, whenever that's going to be. Seems to be taking forever, that main road in southeast Queensland. Point being, this kind of could set a precedent.
Now, turning to international news, Americans are increasingly happy about the economy, but reluctant to give credit to President Joe Biden.
Almost half of US voters said they were now living comfortably or able to meet expenses with a little left over, according to the latest Financial Times Michigan Ross poll. The 48% figure recorded in March compared with just 43% in November last year. Now, 30% of respondents described overall economic conditions in the US as excellent or good. It's about 21% late last year. By contrast, Biden's approval rating on his handling of the economy in March remained flat from November at just 36%, while 59% disapproved. Now, slightly surprising, US growth last year was the strongest of any large advanced economy. Inflation fell faster, unemployment remains near record lows, the economy added another 275,000 jobs last month, for example. The S&P 500 has hit record highs this year. Yet, Joe Biden ain't getting much credit for that.
You'd have to feel a bit hard done by, wouldn't you, if you were Biden? Come on, guys, what do I have to do to get some credit around here?
I know. It's incredible.
And it certainly makes the presidential campaign interesting because it does kind of blunt somewhat Donald Trump's arguments. But then if people aren't giving Joe Biden the credit for it, maybe it opens it back up as an issue again.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, America right now, the economy is probably as good as any global economy at the moment. Definitely, like compared to China, it's really taking back the mantle as a powerhouse.
Yeah. Anyway, and finally, Sean, the Oscars provided plenty of beautiful images yesterday, and congratulations, of course, to Oppenheimer for winning a whole bunch of awards. But Sean, the most controversial image yesterday was not from the Oscars. It was of an official photo of the Princess of Wales with her 3 children following abdominal surgery over concerns that the image has been, quote, manipulated.
Yeah, so the image is of Princess Kate sitting down. She's surrounded by her children. It's apparently taken by the Prince of Wales. At least that's what came out of the palace. It was released by Kensington Palace on Mother's Day in the UK on Sunday. Hours after the image was released, photo agencies, including Associated Press, AFP, Getty and Reuters, took the highly unusual step of issuing a kill notice to media organisations around the world, removing the image from their photo libraries. AP said the photo appeared to have been manipulated at the source, i.e. at the palace. Now, Princess Kate's remained out of the public eye for more than 2 months after she underwent abdominal surgery on January 17. The past few weeks, there has been growing noise about where is she? No one's seen her. Suddenly on Mother's Day, they released a photo. I think you and I discussed this off air. When you have AP, AFP, Getty, Reuters all pulling it, saying it's been doctored, you can kind of have some confidence that it's been doctored.
Yeah, that there is at least some legitimate kind of concerns. And reading about what those kind of concerns are, I mean, this is really up-close examination stuff. And the sleeve on Princess Charlotte's jumper does not align with her hand. It's like at this kind of right angle. And then you've got kind of one of the other kids, their jumpers, the pattern doesn't line up either. It kind of repeats when it doesn't repeat on the other side. And you're like, oh, okay, someone has checked this out very, very closely. But they are a few kind of little tells perhaps of maybe a little bit of AI being used.
And all it does, if it was doctored, all it does was actually increase speculation about where she is.
Yeah.
And I hope, we hope she's in good health.
Absolutely.
And she doesn't, well, maybe she does need to appear in public, but that's kind of not the point here. We do hope she's in good health, but this isn't going to help the speculation.
No, certainly not. And also those 4 agencies putting out a kill notice.
Yeah.
Certainly, I mean, those 2 words, suddenly every kind of tabloid paper in the world is jumping all over it going, kill notice, that's going straight in the headline.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, the first thing I did when I saw the story was go and find the photo.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Suddenly attention and speculation, as you say, has just stepped up significantly. Big day, Sean. Up next is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. You're speaking with Dr. Shane Oliver, Chief Economist at AMP.
Big day, big interview with Shane, talking about the macroeconomic outlook, what that means for investors and how investors, where investors should put their money, really.
Yeah, it is coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Tuesday, the 12th of March, 2024. Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, X, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed Business News. Have a great day.